And welcome to the first ever crash course of holy crap, I need to learn some photography because I just got hired or I'm doing a bunch of cool stuff and I got some new cool gear. So I have the fortunate ability to be able to teach this today to one of my clients, helpers, workers, and we're gonna get right to it, all right? So we're gonna start at the top, very top. How does the camera see light, okay? So with the camera, as I come over here off frame, old camera, right? So I'm not gonna, this is not a history test. I'm not gonna go and way deep. I'm just gonna give you the things, right, that you need to know. So this is really an SLR. And then all of a sudden it was DSLR for digital, right? Well, this camera sees light as reflective, right? So in other words, a reflective light means I have a camera guy right here. So here's my little camera right here, you know, my little camera, my lens, and here's a dude right here, yay. And then maybe behind it is a wall, right? There's a wall, okay? So I have a wall and I have a camera, and what this light meter inside this camera wants to see right here, or it wants to see what we call a balance, like the middle point, right? And what I mean by that is a reflective light is light that comes into the subject and bounces back to the camera, okay? That's called reflective light, okay? So you have a reflective light meter in every single one of these by default. You can't have what we call an incident light meter. An incident light meter is one of those handheld light meters that has a little dome on it right here, and it measures the light falling on the subject. So the little happy rays right here, yay, sun, light falling on the subject, right? A camera doesn't do that. A camera is gonna measure all the light bouncing off this wall, coming back, bouncing off the ground, coming back, whatever is in that scene, it's gonna be metered in the light. Now, cameras today have gotten a lot better about reflective light, but it's not a true representation of the shot. So if I had a white wall, okay, and I had a snowman, big ass snowman right here, check him out, yay. And this is a white wall, all right? And then there's a snowman, and my frame is right here. What I see in the camera, all white. Do you think what the camera sees would be an accurate representation of that light? No, that's correct. Because what the camera wants to see is it wants to see this. Let me get another marker here. It wants to see, I shouldn't say it wants to see it. The meter in the camera wants to average it out. It wants to average out the exposure, all right? So the camera wants to see is a perfect square like this, and half black, half white. So when it's half black, half white, that's a perfect exposure as a reflective camera back to coming to a camera, right? So when you have a snowman right here, you have to compensate for that in the exposure. So because this goes back to grayscale and black, I get really hung up on here because I want to kind of move forward. So I'm kind of only going to touch upon these subjects, but not like be completely detailed and break it all down kind of a thing. But if this is the top and this is completely 100% white and 0 is black, like video, because a lot of shooters now do both, right? Your camera wants to see the middle, right? Wants to see the middle. And in photography terms, that's 18% gray. Just those what they reference, okay? So if my camera meter sees that white and I photograph that, I got my little dials and stuff, and I took a photo, it's gonna actually come out gray. This will kind of come out like gray. As I spelled that incorrectly probably. This will come out gray if you don't do anything. So you have to get into your manual settings and overexpose that shot because the value of all this stuff lies up towards the white side, lies all right here. Because it's a white snowman, it's a white, all that information on exposure value ends up on the top side of the scale, okay? Now, let's just say I'm photographing this right here, and I got a black, huge shipping box on a black wall, right? And it's black. The whole thing is black. Knowing that the camera wants to average it out, the meter in the camera wants to make it say, hey man, I know for a fact that hardly every time nobody's ever gonna really shoot a scene that's fully black. There's always gonna be enough white and black, it'll balance, I'll be able to meter it okay. You know, it'll just happen. That's what the camera's thinking inside of its head. It's like, I got you, man. But then one day, You go to a jet black wall with a black box, you fill it up with hot sun, and you know what that sucker's gonna do? Will it overexpose or underexpose? Because it wants to see, that's correct, it'll overexpose. So this black will end up back to gray, right? Because white, you need to overexpose if you really want to see white. And I don't want to say overexpose, just you want to expose properly, right? So that's what we're trying to get to when you have a reflective meter, right? So exposed properly with snowman on a white wall is different than a black box and a black wall, right? So now that you know what your camera actually meters, called reflective light meter, you know what you're getting into. So if you got a dark skinned model and she's going on some, black sequence and she's coming down like a black waterfall with rocks, you know for a fact, you're gonna have to underexpose that, right? Cameras are really good these days, and they're not as bad, but even like 90s, mid 90s, early 2000s, you have to remember that. And you still have to remember today, but that's why they have exposure matrices and all that stuff today. I'm teaching an old school way. I'm teaching like no brain photography way. So if you want to use the auto functions, that's great, use them. I'm teaching you the theory and basics behind exposure and camera work. So if you know the theory and basics behind all this stuff, you'll be able to do a great job, all right? All right, so first little module is how a camera sees light. Okay, reflective. Now, if I had a light meter and I come here, right? A little light meter, which I have right here. This is called an incident light meter, right? It measures what? The light falling on the subject. So whether it's here or here, I'm gonna know the right exposure, all right? That's why pros use light meters, You can always be assured of the exact light, right? So if I do this and I go, oh look, it's F8. Oh look, it's F8. It's F8 because it's the light falling, not reflecting. It's gonna render the white snowman correctly. It will render the black wall, black box correctly with instant light meter. Now you know why they make these, right? Even today. And we'll come back to this when it comes to strobe time. All right, moving on. Is there any questions about reflective and incident metering of your camera? All right, yay. We're moving right along. We're whizzing by this. Who needs to go to school? You can just come here. That's right, great Marksy. All right, incident reflective. Okay, exposing correctly. All right, so what we have here is pretty much the heart and soul of all camera systems and how you manipulate them to give the exposure you want, okay? So you have ISO, right? You have shutter, and then you have aperture. We'll just abbreviate that. I'm a horrible speller, so whatever. So here we go. ISO is also sometimes referred to as ASA. We'll start here. Back in the days of film had a speed to it. And what they mean by speed is sensitivity of the actual emulsion of the film, okay? So back in the 50s, 60s, film had an emulsion like a 64 ISO, Kodachrome. Even to this day, some of the best film, if you can find it and shoot it, you should do it. It's cool, but that's a has-been kind of past. So a little tear forms up as I talk about Kodachrome 64. But 64 stood for the speed, super slow speed. You needed a lot of light to expose it, all right? So the ISO could go from 64 back in the day, and then 3200 was a huge drop with like T-Max film, right? So those are the two kind of ISO. And all this means is that more sensitive to light, less sensitive to light, right? Now, the other thing too is you have grain, we'll put a G, you have grain in your finished product, big grain here, and then you have what we call smaller grain. Now, in today's world, because you got alpha emulsion, right? This equals noise now, okay? Noise. And we won't get into the idiosyncrasies of noise, right? So now that you know between ISO and ASA, if in doubt, always try to shoot the lowest ISO. That it still holds true today, right? So if you're out and about, whatever, try to shoot the lowest ISO if you can. You can't always do that, because that's why they always give you the option. But just know that if you're gonna go ISO, you're gonna increase your grain if you're still shooting film. but no one is. Maybe 1, 2 people. Or noise in your image, right? All right.